We are recording. How's it going, everyone? My name is Alex. I'm here with my co host, Jeremy Schreiber, and this is episode God knows what of the Shrubway series. We know we've been gone for a long time, but don't you worry. We're back and we're better than ever. Jeremy, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty great, Alex. A little disappointed from some of the rumblings from what has gone on the last few days with some big signings. Obviously, the one big one that we all know of is the Juan Soto signing for your New York Mets. And Steve Cohen and David Stearns got it done. And now he's going to be a Met for, at least another 5 years, pending that, that what was it called, Alex? The
He has a
clause. They
he has a player opt out.
player opt out.
He's a player opt out that the Mets could buy out for an extra $4 million a year. So that
Right.
15-year, $765 million contract could turn into a 15-year, $805 million contract. And Jeremy, let me tell you, I told you I brought some props today. And man, for the first time ever, it's a good day to be a Mets fan. First time in
Nothing
our
changes.
lives. It's exciting to be a Mets fan. Tommy's excited. He's excited to be a Mets fan, right, Tommy? He's excited to be a Mets fan, and all my Mets fan brothers and sisters out there, they're excited, Jeremy. They're excited because you know what? The best free agent in all of baseball, Tommy, what's his name? Juan Soto. He's a Met. He ain't no Yankee. He's a Met. That's right. Meet the Mets. And guess what, Jeremy? Tommy keeps jumping up because he's so excited right now. Jeremy, I've got a quote here that I want to ask you about, right? Because I don't think Jeremy's seen this quote yet, guys. So there's a couple quotes here that I just want to get your take on this, okay? So let's get into this, right? So we're talk a little bit baseball, free agency. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about football. Who knows? But today in his press conference, when they asked Juan Soto if he's talked much to his former Yankee teammates, you know what he said, Jeremy? He said, and I quote, "I haven't talked to any of those guys since the World Series." So my question to you, right? If you're hoping to bring Juan back, right? And the Yankees clearly were hoping to bring him back. 16 years, $760 million was their offer. They didn't offer him a suite, unlike what the Mets did. They didn't really offer him, the royalty treatment that Steve Cohen offered him when Steve Cohen brought him to his $32 million home in the Beverly Hills area. Tommy is launching himself at me right now. Jeremy, if you're trying to woo someone to sign back with your team where he had a good year, right? He had a good year. Does it bother you a little bit that Aaron Judge didn't make a call to him? That Garrett Cole didn't make a call to him? That Giancarlo's. Does this bother you at all? Because, man, I'll tell you right now, as a Mets fan, I'm hoping right now that Lindor, Vientos, Juan Soto, Nimmo are on the phone with the polar bear right now saying, man, we need you back. I'm hoping they're saying, come on, dog. Come on
I
back. Let's come out of
that
hibernation. So, Jeremy, does it bother you to know that none of your Yankees did their part in trying to bring Juan back? Does it bother
well,
you? Because it would bother me a lot. Jeremy, you have the floor. I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to eat some pasta while I listen to this.
well, I guess that would bother me a little bit, Alex, if that in fact is the case. I guess we don't know for certain, but obviously, that is a tweet, and that's somebody who's involved you know, in all Major League Baseball, and obviously. So I mean, if that is in fact true, that I guess I'm a little bothered by that. But I've also seen some news about how maybe it was more of a rumor that Soto maybe wasn't a fan of being a co-star with Aaron Judge and the Yankees club.
Hold on. Are you going to tell me he's not going to be a co-star with Francisco Lindor, an MVP finalist this
Well,
year?
but
Are you going
so
to tell me he's not going to be a co-star with Mark Vientos, who had one of the best postseasons and a first postseason ever in the history? You tell me that
well,
he's
this is
not.
a little
You're
different.
telling me that he's not going to be a co-star in any sense of that, man?
Oh, of course, well, he's going to be the main star. Be the main star. I think Aaron Judge with the New York Yankees is the main star, and he's been putting up big numbers, home run wise, and slugging percentage. So if you're talking about, you talk about even back to like the '60s when the Yankees had Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, how Roger Maris was sort of like the co-star to Mickey Mantle, was sort of like, you know, sort of that. Mickey Mantle was the star. Came up in the farm system, was with the Yankees, and then Maris was, traded over from the Royals, and they were battling for the home run crown. And obviously,
Sure.
Maris beat him out. But maybe it's a little bit different circumstance. But like just in terms of the year that Soto and Judge had collectively, I mean, they both put up combined like 80 home runs, maybe
Something
more
like
than
that.
that. I
Probably
mean,
more than
no, I
that.
mean,
Judge
so
almost
they
put up
were up
60.
there in terms of like up there in all Major League Baseball in home runs, and was also both of them were in the running for the AL MVP, in which obviously Aaron Judge had won that once again.
Okay.
But I mean, it's a tough break there. Maybe I don't know what to make of that. Maybe the Yankee players, for some reason, were maybe they didn't always have a great relationship with Soto. Maybe for the year that he was there, maybe Soto just sort of minded his own business. I don't know. It was just. I mean, obviously, if you're trying to bring back a slugger, an
Mhm.
all-star who can help your ball club win a World Series, get you a World Series year after year, obviously you want to, you know, be in close quarters with him. But I mean, the Yankees can still figure some things out with the absence of Soto. Maybe they go out and get like a Kyle Tucker from the Astros.
Sure.
They did also make a nice signing, a left-handed pitcher, Max Fried, who is 30, going to be 31, I believe, by the time the season starts, to an
Thank
eight-year deal.
God he's not with Atlanta anymore. Keep going.
Right now, he's out of your division, so that's a double whammy for me.
Boom! We love it.
um, but yeah, so signs 8 years. That's a really long deal for someone who's 30, 31. But a lot of these players, these star players specifically, want those long-term deals. So you just have to give them the years along with the price tag.
Sure. And, also with Freed, one of my concerns there would be he's been often injured. I mean, that guy is on the IL every other day, it seems, right? Um, but obviously a very effective pitcher, really good left-handed pitcher, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
And I believe his contract is like the biggest ever for a left-handed pitcher. So hey, good for him. He got his money. Um, I'm not going to begrudge and bemoan anybody getting their payday. Now, Jeremy, I just want to backtrack here to Juan for a minute. Okay, I want to make this all about the Mets. All right, the Mets. All right, because it's
Of
all
course.
about the Mets, baby. Now,
Hey,
question:
they haven't won anything yet.
they won the Juan Soto sweepstakes. All right, so they won something. All right.
Well, we got to see how if they do not get off to a
Jeremy,
solid start.
Jeremy, Jeremy, you already know when April comes around, I'm going to be upset because the Mets are playing at that point. So let me have
Presently,
peasants. So let me have this win. Mike Francesa, if you're ever watching, that one was for you. So Jeremy, so just to reiterate, you are if that is true, you're a little disappointed then. Yes.
I'm a little disappointed. Yes.
Okay. All right. So now one other quote for you, and this comes from Juan Soto himself, right? Supposedly, right? We heard Jeff Passan say this on Sunday night. I was sitting in the Sacramento airport when I was listening to him talk about this post marathon. Jeremy, let me tell you, right? Could barely move a couple days ago, but this Juan Soto stuff, it's got me jazzed again. Oh yeah, come on, Jeremy. Oh. Anyway, so they asked him why he ended up choosing the Mets, right? And part of that is why he chose the Mets over the other four teams, but specifically over the Yankees, right? We heard Jeff Passan say, I believe the quote was something along the lines of he looked at the Mets, he looked at the Yankees, he looked at their futures, and thought the future in New York with the Mets in Queens was brighter than it was with the Yankees in the Bronx, right? Today, he says, and I quote, I think we have the best chance to win here, meaning in Queens. Now, not here in Edinburgh, Texas, where I currently reside, but up in Queens and in Flushing more specifically. Now, I just want to say a couple of things here, Jeremy, right? So first of all, regardless if this stuff is true or not, right? Like,
Yeah.
he's got to say something when we're like, why'd you choose the Mets over the Yankees? Like, does he actually think they have a better chance of winning there? Maybe. I mean, Steve Cohen's pockets are obviously deeper than anybody else in all of baseball, right? We've seen that with his willingness to spend high AAV, right, on Verlander and on Scherzer. Didn't work out, right? But he wasn't afraid to come back and then do it again, right? So I think from that aspect of things, perhaps Cohen sold him on, hey man, we've got no problem spending more money. We're going to be north of $315 million again. I think that's what they're at last year, $315 million on payroll. Got no problem spending that extra 110,000 million that we have to spend. Still after adding his contract this year, right? So maybe he's looking at that and going, "This guy's going to spend. He does not care." Maybe Hal, when he looked at it, said, well, we're not going to spend more after we sign him. And perhaps Juan Soto looked at that and said, well, I want to go someplace where my contract is not going to hamstring them. And for years, right, decades, when George was alive, right, we were alive for the back end of George's, like, the last few years of his, like,
A
reign
little
in
more
New
than
York,
that.
if you will, right?
Yeah, even a little
Sure.
more. Yeah,
Yeah. So we were around for a little bit of that, right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I could tell you, having been grown up in New York as a Mets fan, we were always told that we were like lesser, right? But now apparently now, and once again, we have to see what keeps happening with free agency, right? Who the Mets have to obviously fill out their rotation. You can't go in there with what they currently have as a 1 through 5. I personally think, and
And oh, sorry, Alex, cut you off. And also to
yeah,
add, Luis Severino, no, because he was a free agent that the Oakland A's had signed him to actually
yes,
big, so
yes.
that they couldn't, they can't hold on to everybody just like every other club. But they do have Manaya.
Well, they haven't re-signed Mania yet. Mania is still a
They
free
have to
agent, but
resign. Well, right, they
they've
have the
stayed.
opportunity to get him.
That's right, and they've stayed in close talks with him. So who knows what happens there? But I also think that and by the way, I was in Sacramento the day that Luis Severino was announced as the A's pitcher, right? And we all know that that's what they're playing next year. So
Right.
what I'm saying is Luis Severino waited for me to be out there so that he could walk out in the A's uniform. Good for him, biggest contract in A's history, but also you're going to the A's who don't like to spend money. So
Well, they don't have any money to spend.
well, there's that too. But I look the way I look at all of this, right? Is if you're a Mets fan, you're hopeful that like, okay, Steve Cohen's gonna keep spending money, right? If there's one thing that we've seen in the first 4 or 5 years, however long he's been the owner of the Mets, he's not afraid to spend, right?
Absolutely.
He's not afraid to spend, even when the contract doesn't work out. Which, as a Mets fan, I love it. I lived through the Wilf Ponds trying to pitch me Michael Kadire as like the big free agent signing, but now we actually get to like look at the Juan Sotos of the world, right? Obviously they signed K Rod, right? But if you're this is our big thing is a closer, right? When you look at the grand scheme of how much money you're actually paying for a closer versus for this stud outfielder, it's night and day. It's not even close, man. It's crazy, right? So I guess what's your take on the fact that he's saying that he thinks he has a better chance to win in Flushing than he does in the Bronx, considering the Mets were a few wins away from the World Series. The Yankees were in the World Series. We obviously know what happened there with the Dodgers smacking them around. Perhaps you could hit some managerial decisions with Boone, especially in Game One.
Yeah,
But
especially,
especially in Game One, right? But so
especially
what are your thoughts on that, Jeremy? And once again, I'm going to mute and enjoy some delicious pasta.
well, Alex, you bring up some very valid points, and I enjoy your enthusiasm about your ball club that is the New York Mets. Let's go a little bit back before I go into how I feel about Juan Soto and how he thinks the future is better with the Mets than it is with the Yankees. I was at that game, Game Five between the Yankees and the Dodgers. Saw Garrett Cole on the mound, was moseying along through 4 innings. I mean, he didn't give up any hits through four. They're up 5-0. In the first inning, we got a great 2-run homer from Aaron Judge. Everybody's out of their seats. I got to see that pretty close up, and I was like going crazy. And then Jazz Chisholm, it's a home run. They go back to back, and then Stan later on makes it 5-0. Like, okay, Cole's settled in, might be able to send it back to LA. Obviously, it was not to be. And also that slow roller to first base is freaking nightmarish for me, and still is just imprinted in my brain. Obviously, as Alex, doesn't like the Yankees to win, as most Met fans don't like because they don't like the Yankees fans. They get a bad rap. A lot of them, specifically more recently with a fan who tried to grab the ball out of Mookie Betts' glove. It's not cool. Not a good idea. I'm glad that
Quick,
they
quick,
took
quick
away.
note: Jeremy is not one of those Yankee fans, but the rest of y'all, Come give me some hate on Twitter, all right? I think it says Alex underscore Sanso or Sanso underscore Alex, something like that. Come give me some hate on Twitter. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back. Let's get down to business. So talking about, has it likes the future better with the Mets than the Yankees? So I mean, it's certainly a compelling argument. From a non-biased perspective. The Mets do have really good young talent, such as Vientos, as you mentioned, who had 14 RBIs in the postseason. And you have Lindor, who is having his best year, arguably, probably in 3 seasons. I know he had been on the shelf for a little bit, I believe, in his second year with the Mets, if I'm not mistaken. So he's been, a big run producer for them. And Nimmo, who's got speed. Like they got a lot of speed in that lineup, and a lot of guys who can hit for power. A lot of like, especially if they bring Pete Alonso back. That certainly, um, does change around a few things. And I think, the way things you look on the Yankees side of things when, we have Anthony Volpe, who's still pretty solid shortstop. And then we have, um, we do have a hole at first base. We don't, Gleyber Torres is left. That we do have um, Austin Wells behind the plate, who's a pretty good defensive catcher. But you do worry about later on this season, offensively, because it's hard for those catchers to maintain those good numbers when it gets to October, as it was evident in the playoffs. I believe he didn't bat, uh, an eyelash over 150. So, I mean, it's fair to say that the Mets lineup as it stands today, obviously that could change with more signings as we progress through the winter, but the Mets says, the players that they already do have that we know are going to be coming back next year, and even for the foreseeable future, I could see how they, that team maybe has a better chance of getting to the playoffs and getting far into the playoffs every year, maybe a little bit more so than the Yankees, but,
Yeah.
um, you know, I think I think it might be a fair statement to make.
Well, we can go through it position by position really quickly. We really don't know who's going to be slotting in at first base for either of these teams right now,
Yeah.
right? Second base for the Mets, you've got Jeff McNeil, perhaps Luis Angel Acuna, right? Who's playing second for the Yankees?
Right.
Right, right. Okay. We go to shortstop. We got Lindor versus Glaber. I think it's a no-brainer. We'll take Lindor over Glaber or who is the Volpe, right? Volpe's there, and then Glaber was over at third, right? Or he was at seven,
I believe he's at second base, actually. I
right?
believe he's at second base,
Okay.
but he's left the club.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it's going to be tough. And
Yep.
then LeMahieu is
Yep.
actually still under contract. I know, sorry to
Nope.
interrupt.
You're good. You're
LeMahieu
good.
still has a couple more years, I believe 3 more years on his contract, so he's still going to be playing there. He might play third base a little bit. Hopefully, he's injury free
Sure.
most of the year because he did
Sure.
miss a lot of the season this past
Sure.
year. But he is obviously in the tail end of his career.
Yep.
So there's some question marks, and then you saw Dominguez in the outfield. Is he gonna be a better defensive player as well as offensively?
Yep. Yep.
So there's a few more question marks I think from the Yankee side of things than there are from the Mets. The Mets just have to fix that bullpen a little bit, tighten that up.
Spent on the rotation a little bit.
Right.
And look. Here's the thing: the Yankees, their outlook can turn around like that if they sign Bregman, they sign Pete, and one more bat probably,
Wow,
right? Then
Tucker.
all of a sudden you go from maybe the Mets are brighter to it's probably about the same. Maybe you inch towards the Yankees. I mean, the question, right, with Aaron Judge is in his 30s, right? So how many more years does Aaron Judge really have to sit there and protect Juan Soto in the lineup, right? Now, Aaron Judge is obviously, yeah, he's
I
like
think at least
God
another
amongst men, all right?
God, I think at least another 5 years, Alex. Pending
Well,
injury.
how old is Aaron Judge right now?
I believe he's 31 today.
Okay, so
As of right
typically a player's prime is from about 28 to 32, right? Then you start seeing a little bit of a fall off.
Right. It's
I
okay.
think until he's
Never
about
pretty quick.
35, 36, he'll probably, yeah, I agree with you. Until he's about 35, 36, he'll probably still be extremely
Yeah.
productive. But I don't know you're going to be seeing 60 home runs in a season again from him at,
Yeah, that's too much to ask
once
for.
he gets to his mid 30s, right? And if Soto is signing this 15-year deal, right? Once again, Lindor is about the same age. He's a year younger, a year older than Judge, so they're about the same age, right? But if you have an owner like Steve Cohen, who's like, I do not care. I will spend on whatever I need to. And then, a la what he did with Scherzer and Verlander, I've got no problem shipping people off and getting stud prospects back in, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so I agree with you, right? And you look at the outfield of the Yankees, I think the Yankees probably have a strong, well, maybe. I mean, your case for them having a stronger outfielder field is they have Aaron Judge, and Aaron Judge is a known commodity, right? Versus the Mets now, we have Juan Soto, who's not a great defender. Let's call it like it is. Not terrible, but not great.
He's got a good arm.
He's got a good
Uh,
arm, which
yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
You've got Nimmo probably playing left field again this year.
Yep.
And then Tyrone Taylor in center, which that would be a position if I was the Mets, I'd be looking to upgrade. But once again, you've got you're gonna have some weaker points in your roster because you're not going to spend $765 million on every single position in the diamond. That would be absolutely insane,
Yeah.
right?
No organization, regardless of the wealth, is going to be able to spill that kind of money.
Correct, because that would just be stupid money, right?
Right.
But I think with the Mets, I mean, supposedly they're going to be big players for Sasaki, the pitcher who was just posted from Japan.
Yep.
I've heard them tied to Bueller. I've heard them tied to Manaya, right? You guys see them maybe get another couple pieces in the bullpen, right? But I do think the Mets will be contenders again next year. They've obviously got one of the hardest divisions in baseball to contend with the Braves and the Phillies there. I think the Yankees will be contenders again next year. The Yankees are almost. I mean, we've gone and counted this. I think the Yankees have made the playoffs or missed the playoffs as many times as the Mets have made them. Although in the last couple of years, the Mets having made the playoffs in 22, and then this past year, I think it's probably starting to go. The Mets have now made the playoffs more times than the Yankees have missed the playoffs in our lives. We could perhaps do that on a later podcast and just go through that just to give you guys the stats on those, right? But yes, Jeremy, I agree with you. In that, the Yankees have a lot of question marks, but all you need is a couple signings, and then those question marks turn into exclamation points or periods at the bare minimum, where you get some solid pieces there. And you got to hope that your farm system hits, right? You've got to hope the farm system hits, and you never know with the farm system. Sometimes you get really good studs. Sometimes you get people who barely know their elbow from their knee,
Right.
right?
Not even like Brett Beatty as an example, for the Mets, right?
Correct. Yeah, and Beatty has been probably the perennial quadruple A player, right? Where he's great in triple A, not great in the majors. Now, you could have said the same thing about Mark Vientos going into last year, right? Mark Vientos had a couple cups of coffee up in the majors, sitting in triple A. Then all of a sudden, it clicked for him, and it could click for Beatty too, right? I think Beatty is going to be in his mid. I think Beatty and Soto might be about the same age, which is hilarious to me. So perhaps it clicks for him this year, and the Mets have him at third base. They put Vientos at first. They don't re-sign Pete, and maybe it clicks for Beatty. Maybe it doesn't, right? But I think it's possible. But that's why when you see people trade like the Red Sox trading for Crochet, and I have a good friend Anthony, and Jeremy and I talk about him frequently, who was freaking out because, oh my God, they trade away these prospects. And it was like, well, the prospects are just lottery tickets. We don't know how good they are or aren't going to be, right? They may be the next Aaron Judge, right? Maybe the next Mike Piazza they traded away. But guess what? It may be, not will be. There's nothing guaranteed in life. And
Right.
we
They
don't
haven't
know.
proven themselves yet.
Exactly. And very rarely do you get somebody like Pete or Judge who comes up from the minors and is just tearing the cover off the ball in their first year, right? Oftentimes they come up and they struggle for the first few months. And then they hit low 200s, 250, right? Maybe not driving in a bunch. And then it's like in their second, third, fourth year sometimes is when they finally figure it out. But sometimes it never happens. And more often than not, it never happens, right? Think about how many people go through an MLB roster every single season. Think about every little transaction, right? Calls up from the minors to the majors every year, right? So going back to like, this free agent sort of stuff, right? Yes, obviously you want to sign some really good players. You need to sign some people to some minor league deals as well. It'll be interesting for me to see what the Yankees end up doing. I think it'll be interesting for you as well. Interesting to see what happens with the Mets. They're still connected to Pete. They're still connected to Sean. Who knows? Jeremy, closing thoughts. Go.
Yeah, you bring up some very valid points. So I guess I want to specifically pinpoint about Pete Alonso because now that he is a free agent, and to see if the Mets are going to want to re-sign him or that the Yankees. I don't know. I mean, there were rumblings about talking about bringing Pete Alonso at first base, but I don't know. I mean, he's a great first baseman. I guess they still need like a lefty bat, maybe somebody who's like a lefty power hitter at first base, or just a lefty hitter in general. I mean, they really need to focus on lefty power because after Soto has no left, that obviously made it evident. Which they had issues with that beforehand, before Soto arrived, that they were so right heavy, and they didn't have enough left-handed power. So now they need left-handed power to offset that again. Maybe you got a Kyle Tucker or whoever the case may be, and because you got the short porch in right field, and like, I mean, it just makes sense for that ballpark to have a little more left-handed power. Back with like the free agents like Mania, who else? We were talking about Pete Alonso, Sean Mania.
Walker
There's
Bueller,
Walker Bueller. So
Sasaki.
maybe Walker Bueller, and I mean, my gosh, if the Mets the Mets grab Walker Bueller too, like holy crap, you gotta have Walker Bueller and Sean Mania as like your 1-2 punch, and that starting
with
rotation.
with Kodai Senga,
Right,
possibly Sasaki, and then David Peterson, who was really good last year and gets forgotten about all the time. He
right.
was really good.
That's true. He was striking out a lot of batters. Like
Talk about a player who it took him years to figure it out, right?
yeah,
I remember
um,
every time I'd be like, "Oh God, Peterson's pitching." Now all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, thank God, Peterson's pitching,"
right.
right? The Mets
Yeah.
have a
Oh,
good. They have a good rotate. They have the chance to have a really good rotation again.
absolutely.
But
I mean, from the Yankees' perspective, I mean, then they've added a left-handed pitcher into the rotation behind Cole,
yep,
which is really going to help that help their rotation. They have a solid rotation. Maybe they're still going after Sasaki as well, so maybe
yep.
it comes down between the Yankees and the Mets. I did read, I believe by January 20th, he has to sign with an MLB club.
That sounds about
Sasaki.
right. That sounds about right. And Jeremy, I was seeing something with Sasaki yesterday where apparently the two clubs he most the front runners right now for him would be the Metropolitans
Of course.
and the Padres.
Yeah, the Padres are also in the mix as well. They're trying to bring in
Yep.
another, along with you, Darvish, a great, starting pitcher.
Yep.
And then battling, I guess, with the Dodgers who have a big
Yep.
player from Japan,
That's right. They've
Yamamoto.
got two,
Got
Shohei and Yamamoto, right? And
two solid
Darvish is
players.
Sasaki's godfather.
Right.
That's right. So,
Yeah.
all right, guys, we will thank you for tuning in. We're going to be back on Monday. We're going to talk a little bit about the Giants and Jets absolutely doo-dooing themselves all over the field. The Giants, of course, will be at MetLife. The Jets will be God knows where.
Well,
Um,
the Giants got to play Baltimore.
yeah, the Giants are going to lose, unfortunately. All my Giants fans out there, I'm so sorry. Um, you'll be able to catch this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You'll be able to see the video on YouTube if you want to watch the video. You can see my dog. He's awesome. If you're still listening at this point, drop us a like. Please leave a comment. Tell Jeremy he's really pretty or tell me that I'm really ugly. Either one is totally fine. It helps us, and the algorithm will go a long way. So we'll be back next week with some football stuff. Come back with some more baseball stuff later in the week, possibly more free agent signings. Or Jeremy will be crying about Juan Soto still not being a Yankee and how the Yankees are no longer gods amongst men, as the honorable Michael Francesa father would say. With that being said, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you again next time. Back after this.